Good morning. Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 25th day of September 2023. Should I say exactly 3 months to Christmas? My name is Sam Gituku. Karibu sana to the show once more. And I want to introduce the panelists here in studio. I have Jen Kagiri, who is the woman representative for Laikipia County. Good morning. Good morning, Sam. It's been a couple of weeks. We haven't seen you.
Yes, because I was concentrating on my county. I'm glad to be back.
Okay, karibu sana. Robert Mboi is the Member of Parliament for Kathiani, but also the Deputy Minority Leader at the National Assembly. Good morning.
Morning, Sam.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
David Ochieng is the Member of Parliament for Ugenya constituency. Good morning.
Good morning, Sam. How have you been?
Well, you disappeared.
No, whenever you call me, I respond to your call.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you're throwing it back at me as well. So this morning we're looking up to several stories on the papers, including fees windfall for private varsities, that is on the Daily Nation. Then you'll see on the Standard, Ruto term limit jitters of a push for extra years. Of course, Nandi Senator is the one who has sponsored that memorandum that he has presented to the dialogue team, and he's making quite an argument here. Depends on how you look at it. This enabled the president to have good opportunity to form and establish a formidable team, or rather team, to deliver his manifesto. Besides, the presidential election is always highly profiled as a result of it being conducted within a short period of time. So he's suggesting that we move from a term limit of 5 years to 7 years. And of course, the paper says that lawyers and politicians are having none of that, asking the team to ignore the request, but others see hidden hand in the drive. And I just want us to quickly, very briefly, go through this with the panelists. Honorable Mboi, what do you think? What is this? Because, I mean, we've been having the 5-year term since, I think, independence, but the limit was put in 1992, and President Moi went on to serve for a full 10 years. Never mind, he had served for a whole 14. So where is this coming from?
You know, Sam, we've always been concerned about the management of this team of Kenya Kwanza. And in fact, we were very worried even before the last election that if this team was to get into office, they'll probably even want to abolish the term limit. And this is an attempt actually to get to that, because the minute you start talking about a 7-year term, that means if you're going to do 2 terms of 7 years, that's 14 years. That's an extra 4 years over and above. And somehow I'll tell you that if any attempt is made to change the term limit, what it means is that immediately after the term limit is changed, or the length of term is changed, then you argue that the incumbent will be starting off like anyone else. So then they will be starting their first 7-year, then probably a second 7-year term. This is totally unacceptable, and that is the kind of games that we do not want. These people there's so much that we need to look at in the Constitution, but definitely not the issue of a term limit of Ruto. Especially now, we've just done 1 year of Ruto's term, and we are already crying. So how can we extend that beyond even 1 day?
Honorable Cheng, should we even be talking about such? I mean, this argument that the election is highly profiled, and because of that, we conduct elections within such a short time, meaning 5 years, does that argument hold any water?
Sam, I've told you severally. This one, dead on arrival. We will not entertain it. It doesn't matter whether I'm in Kenya Kwanza or Tanzania. This cannot be entertained. And the person thing about these kind of things is living in the past, the very, very dark past of this country. And we want to advise anybody who is imagining that our constitution can be changed willy-nilly, that our constitution can just be bent because your kinsman is in power, to think twice. These kind of thoughts are of lazy people who have refused to think of how we can better the lives of Kenyans and make do with what we have as the law. Our constitution, by the way, is a very progressive one. And changing things like term limits require a referendum. I don't think any right-thinking Kenyan would support the moving of term limits from what they are now. If you can't change the lives of Kenyans in 10 years, you'll never change it. So let Cherargei and his ilk think of better things to do. Stop bothering us with things that will never happen.
Do you think these are his thoughts, or it's coming from far?
No, and I don't want you to even think about it. These are his very simplistic thoughts.
Honorable Kagiri, what are your thoughts? Should we even be discussing it in the first place?
Sam, let me first appreciate the level of democracy in the Kenya Kwanza coalition, because this is Senator Cherargei's personal opinion. And I believe nobody's behind it. It is not something that should be on the top of our list at the moment, because right now our greatest concern is lowering the cost of living and not thinking about presidential terms.
Okay, all right. And I think we'll leave it at that, because that's a proposal written by Samson Cherargei. He has his arguments, he has written his documents and presented them to the National Dialogue Committee. We'll wait to see what sort of a conversation that sparks there. But also we know that the past 1 week has been interesting, especially in the war against corruption. You've seen Felix Koskei writing a letter to the boards of 2 water companies and talking about what should happen in terms of fighting graft. And talking about at the water department, where we've seen Water Cabinet Secretary coming out and saying that, no, I will follow the rule of law, not exactly the directives that may have come from the EACC as well as the head of public service. And Honorable Mbui, when you see such kind of communication, because we saw eventually Michael Thoita threw in the towel and stepped aside, what do you think is happening, and what powers does the head of public service have over state corporations?
Now, my opinion is that, you know, I was fortunate to have sat in the committee that was doing panel beating. Mm-hmm. The panel that was vetting this cabinet that has been appointed by the president. And it was one of the things that came out very clearly is that quite a number of the CSs that were proposed don't have what it takes to run this country. Mm-hmm. And we said as much. And of course, the tyranny of numbers business in Kenya, we were voted, we were voted out, and the team was put in office. None other than the president himself has since said that he's very disappointed at the way the teams that he's put in office are managing their affairs. In fact, he said that quite a number of them he knows much more about their ministries than a number of them. Now, I tend to feel that what the president is doing is running the government from State House and running every department. Because for me, the head of civil service cannot be the one that is managing the Ministry of Water and water companies in Kenya. Because that means then he'll be running also the Ministry of Energy, he'll be running also the Ministry of Transport. I think it's unfortunate for a person in such an office to be getting to meddle in the affairs of other ministries. But then the problem is really because the appointing of authority probably didn't put the right people into office. But having said that, I want to look at the issues that are at hand on the matters of corruption. Mm-hmm. When you listen to the current case, they're talking about some changes in specifications, and apparently this has also been reported to the EACC. I want to ask that, these very excitable leaders in government to allow also these institutions like EACC to carry out their mandate. Because EACC is meant to investigate, and then once they have investigated, they can be able to initiate the process of prosecution through DPP. If they haven't reached there, why does the head of civil service get involved and start asking that people be kicked out of office? I think he's jumping the gun. Okay. I think there is a law in place, the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act, and I know EACC are up to the task. Now, was it illegal for the specs to be changed? I hear that the CEO is saying that the reason they changed was because even though apparently the specs have become lower, he says it also, I think, saves about 2.5% of the project cost. He also says it reduces the turnaround time by about 9 months. So could there be some benefit out of that? So for me, I think EACC have their work cut out to give us the real story. But I wouldn't want to listen to the head of civil service on matters to do with management of state corporations.
Right, because the letter from the head of public service and of course the chief of staff, he says that he has the statement that came from State House spokesperson Hussein Mohammed that Felix Koskei has asked the board of the Earthy Water Works Development Agency to suspend its chief executive officer Michael Thoita pending investigations into alleged irregularities in the award of the tender for construction of Railroad 2, Karimenu and Kitui Matu water projects undertaken by the agency. He has also asked the Board of Central Rift Valley Waterworks Development Agency to suspend its Chief Executive Officer, Engineer Samuel Oruma, pending investigations. Of course, says that the head of public service, in letters to the chairman of the two boards, says the two CEOs are in office, notwithstanding the gravity of allegations and the quantum of resources at the inquiry, and says the inordinate delay in taking action on the part of the board of directors and the ministry is undermining the government's war against corruption. Honorable Ocheng, I mean, when did the head of public service start giving instructions to boards?
I don't know when he started doing this. At least I know the law. And the law says that this issue of stepping aside or suspension should happen when someone is charged. And that means that there's been investigations done, and one person or persons found to have a case to answer, so to speak. And so, still some, the head of public service is a very big office, a very powerful office. They could do this without doing letters. They could do this without having to, share letters across the city, one from State House through to, Maji House, then another one, I don't know which other place. He didn't have to do that, in my opinion. These are people that are working in government. These are people under him. The people who could just call and tell them, this is where we are, this is what's happening, this is the report we have from EACC. I believe that if this and that happens, then we will not win the war. I mean, I sympathize with the position of Hopes for one reason, that in the last 1 month alone, he's come out in more than one occasion to tell us that corruption is bleeding this country dry. He's come out publicly to tell us that if we don't deal with the corruption, he thinks we are not going to make any gains in any other thing we are trying to do. So I also understand his frustration and his desire to make things move quickly. But I wanted to go back to what the issues are here, Sam, if you allow me. You see, I sit in one of the committees in Parliament where the issues about this particular ministry has come under very sharp focus, the Ministry of Water. And the issues there range from equity in distribution of resources. I can tell you this without putting an eyelid, that in the last supplementary budget, we had to deal with a very difficult situation where most of the donor money that came into the country was being taken to one region. One. As in, 70% of the money is being taken to one region. So we asked, why are we as Kenyans paying these loans? And when the money is come, they go to one place or two places only. Okay? And so we saw an attempt by the PS to try to rationalize and try to horizontalize the budget in the supplementary, move a few, shillings here and there to try to attempt to distribute the monies. And that's where the war started. And so I believe that what's happening in the Ministry of Water is not even about corruption. It's a bad blood between the PS concerned and the minister concerned. And this has been going on for a while now. It's not something that it's new. If you called any member of the Water Committee in Parliament, they will tell you this is not something new. The war between the minister and the PS is now at fever pitch. So
there are projects that have been allocated resources, so that was being moved and redistributed?
Something like that, because you are looking, for example, look at, if you have 1 billion shillings, and you find that in the budget, 0.7 of that billion shillings is going to 2 regions. This is where the problems are coming from. These huge tenders that go to 1 or 2 regions, like you've just seen, we've seen those 2 tenders that we're talking about, one in the Reef, one in Central, and they're not small monies that people are fighting over. So it's not even about who is culpable. People are fighting at the tender stage because people are trying to look for...
Who are these people? Avenues.
But the people, some of the people are named in the letter you've just read for us.
No. It talks about the CEOs that need to be suspended, but you're saying that people are fighting over. That
letter has so many people involved in it. That letter is addressed to a minister, and it's addressed to a board. So there are so many people involved in this, Sam. There's a minister somewhere, there's a PS somewhere, there's a board somewhere, there's someone who is proposing do this, there's someone who is saying don't do this, someone is saying I will not do this until the law is, I'm advised properly by the law. I mean, you've just read the letter for us. The minister is saying I will not suspend. The PS is saying suspend. The Public Service is saying suspend. The board is saying we're not suspending. Already 4 people involved in a matter, and they're not able to make
and that is why, because we may not have the benefit of the full dossier, if there's such a thing. what is the right thing to do? Because you said that the head of public service is a very powerful office.
Yes.
But with what powers? I mean, there's a reason why the appointing authority appoints a cabinet secretary and a principal secretary. So where does the head of public service stop?
He coordinates the whole government. His job coordinates even from the sub-chief down there. Yes, he has powers over that one. Because he coordinates the whole of the government bureaucracy. That's why he's called the chief of staff and head of public service. That's what the position he holds. So he's head of public service, and public service includes...
Across ministries. So he has
public service includes the ministries.
He has powers beyond a minister.
Yes, he has. In some places he can advise. Because look, it's through the head of public service that the president communicates. It's through the head of public service the cabinet communicates policy. It's through the head of public service that the president coordinates the working of the ministries. That's the position. There are no subcommittees of what. He is at the apex. In fact, I dare say that he could actually be even powerful than the deputy president, because he is the person that is in charge of executing what decision the president makes.
And that is based on what law, Mheshimiwa?
No, this is based on practice, really.
No. So
this is based on practice.
The position is created by the public service, right?
Yes.
So what powers?
I've just told you now.
What powers under what law for that office?
I've told you this is purely practice. And this is not the first head of public service. You know, remember we had more.
So what happens when you have powers enumerated for a cabinet secretary in an executive order?
Yes.
Versus practice?
That's what I've just told you.
What is powerful?
The head of public service doesn't execute his own powers or his own orders. He works for the presidency.
Mheshimiwa, you are more learned than I am in terms of the law. So you have an executive order which is explicit on the powers.
Let's not split hairs.
Just hold on. You have executive order which is explicit on the powers of a cabinet secretary.
Yes.
And then you have a head of public service, a position created by the public service itself.
Yes.
And I'm asking for the powers that office has. So if you had to compare between a cabinet secretary and a head of public service, who carries the day in terms of execution?
There are times when the head of public service will carry the day. Then there are times when the CS will carry the day, because if, for example, let's give an example of the Minister of Water, because that's what we're talking about here. There are things that the Minister for Water is the one who must do them. Even if, for example, the President wanted something to be done in the ministry, head of public service wanted something to be done in the ministry, he can only do it through that minister. For example, if you want to appoint a board, chairman of a board, that the law says the minister must appoint, it has to be that minister. So even if the president had his own person, or the Hopes had his own person, then he has to work through that minister. That's the way it works.
Then why would we have a law stipulating how appointments are made? If it is the cabinet secretary to appoint, why have the president being the one to appoint?
Through the minister. The points?
No, you just told me that if the president has his own person, he can do that through the minister.
But it's one government. Sam, let's not split hairs about things.
You're not splitting hairs. You're just reading the law. Honorable Kagiri, I'll come back to you. Honorable Kagiri,
that's how the government works.
Tell me. Honorable Cheng, I'll come back to you. Honorable Kagiri, tell me, so what is this happening, and what are your views in as far as, because the cabinet secretary is saying that on my part, I support zero tolerance to corruption, and at the same time confirm that I will uphold the rule of law and constitutionalism in handling this matter and any other that may be brought to my attention in the course of my duties as the cabinet secretary. I have not in any way failed to cooperate with the EACC as alleged by mainstream media reports, and the exercise of my discretion not to suspend Engineer Thwita until the requested information is availed to me did not in any way prejudice investigation. So she's sort of trying to explain why she didn't take action against Thwita. And of course, the letter by Felix is saying that by the board and the ministry refusing to suspend Thwita, they're frustrating the war against corruption. What is the right thing to do for a government, a one-government approach?
Some allow me to speak as a layman because I have no legal background. I'm a computer scientist. But that said, looking from the side of a layman, number one, I think as much as we want corruption to be fought in this country, we also need to strengthen the legal process. And I believe the cabinet secretary was failing to act because everybody remains innocent until proven guilty. Or rather, they need to step aside when they are charged. So in this particular case, I looked at the news yesterday and I saw Engineer Thwita has resigned. So is that the end of the process, or does a process start? And again, are we setting a precedence which we may not be able to sustain? Because today, if I suspect Sam is corrupt, is it enough for me to send him away, or a process needs to be ignited for us to be sure what the outcome is? So for me, I would think, number one, maybe we need to set a precedence that is correct, that processes have to be followed legally, so that even if we think somebody is corrupt, let the process be followed and us know to the conclusion of what it is. Because today I still wonder, when they resign, is that the end of it? Are the charges dropped, or was the aim for these people to leave the office? So whatever the case is, as Kenyans, we need to know the end of this whole issue. But some allow me to respond to my colleague, Honorable Mbui, where he stated that the Kenya Kwanza government has cabinet secretaries who don't seem to understand what their work is. And I would beg to differ with him, because as I stated as we were starting, I've been in my county going around my 15 wards for the last 15 days. And I would want to appreciate that for the first time, I have seen cabinet secretaries who are keen on delivery and committed to what they promised Kenyans. I'll give a very good example of CS Moses Kuria, who has been going around launching the county aggregation and industrial parks. For the 15 meetings I held in my county, he sent a team literally to each and every meeting. Laikipia is vast. We have areas called, like I had a meeting in a place called Ewaso. When his team comes to that place and explains to young men and women opportunities coming up for them, I can tell that he's a cabinet secretary who understands what he's doing. We have CS Kindiki, who literally every other day we are communicating on security issues in Laikipia. And today we can say at least we go a week or two or even a month with our people going to sleep because security has improved in our counties. I have CS Rebecca Miano, a lady who is always calling to find out how my people are doing on hunger issues, on borehole issues. These are people who are committed to serve our people. I remember CS Chirchir, when I was starting my meetings, he told me, Jane, go around your county, check the electricity connection, check the issues on electricity. Get back to me once you're back to Nairobi, and we can discuss this. CS Zachary and PS Hinga told me in every of your meetings, please discuss the affordable housing agenda and let young men and women know the opportunities that are there for them. I can continue for a whole day. Chelgui sent his people on Hustler Fund.
And therefore the question, because those are the cabinet secretaries that have been appointed to carry out those duties. So then when you have a letter coming from the head of public service, where should it sit in the arrangement of functions?
For me, I would support what Honorable David said, that I believe it should have been dealt differently, because these are people who are all phone calls away. We didn't have to bring it out to the media. We didn't have to publicize it. It is something that should have been sat down and agreed on. Your time is up. You need to leave without all this.
Who decides that your time is up?
That's why I'm saying we need to work with our legal processes, because if you believe somebody needs to leave, let us use the legal process on that. If they are corrupt...
Honorable Kagiri just told me that it should have been dealt with phone calls instead of all these media and letters, that if your time is to leave, you need to pack and go. So who determines that? Because if it's coming from the head of public service and the mother ministry has not taken action or is asking for more information for them to make a better decision, what should carry the day?
And that's what I'm saying. The dispute is on the process. The mother ministry believes it should be done differently. The head of public service believes it should be done differently. Jane Kagiri believes it should have been done totally differently. And that is why I state, maybe if it was necessary for the person to leave by the time they expected him to leave, or rather by when they wanted him to leave, if it was last week, a phone call would have done it.
Who is this? Who is this who wanted him to leave?
I may not know who wanted him to leave, but by going by the head of public services, letter, it was time for him to leave, because it clearly states that he has to leave, and the board is instructed to actually let him leave.
If you had to reflect on this versus the fair administration of justice, what is the right thing to do? You've been in the private sector, I believe. What is the right thing to happen?
He should be charged if there are corruption charges, and then after that, he's allowed to leave.
And that hasn't happened.
So that is why I say it should have been handled maybe totally different, but I speak as a layman.
Okay, not a layman, you're a lawmaker. Honorable Mbui, tell me, so what is this? What are we witnessing here? And how does the country move forward? Because there appears to be certain powers outside a ministry.
Yeah, first, some allow me, you know, my colleague, the Honorable Kagiri, is very sly. Kagiri has tried to insinuate something about me, but in essence was talking about the President, William Samoei Ruto. Because it is Ruto himself who told us that these CSs are incompetent. They are coming late for a meeting. And he clearly said that some of you, I know more about your ministries than yourselves, and you're not helping me. So instead of using Mbui, just say the president was wrong, because the CSs are doing a very good job.
He said some CSs, not all. And
I also said some CSs.
Okay, carry on.
So, but I think some at the end of the day, we, you know, as a country, are very suspicious of each other. And listening even to my colleagues speak, it looks like. The real matters on these cases of these water CEOs may not even be what we are hearing. I mean, from what I'm getting in this studio now, it could also be opportunities being created for other people. Maybe some people are being fought, because really, if the law is definitive and it is very clear that if one is charged, then they have to step aside, and nobody has been charged yet. EACC is still carrying out investigations. They haven't reached a logical conclusion that this person is culpable. Why is it then that they're in a rush to remove somebody? Why is somebody from outside the ministry in a rush to remove people? And you know, immediately after that, soon we'll have somebody acting as a CEO, and I can tell you this, whoever will be picked to act as CEO will end up being the CEO of those organizations. So I think maybe it's opportunities being created for other people. And again, I've also had, you know, my colleague, the member of the Speaker's panel, the Honorable David Ochieng, who I think may also be folding up his party to join the UDA.
Watch your tongue on that one.
That is Kenya Kwanza's plan.
Come slowly.
No, please just comment on the topic.
So, but he says that apparently the other fight could be also that thing of distribution of resources across the country. Maybe that could be the fight. But at the end of the day, personally, I think we need to stop being suspicious. We need to give the law an opportunity. We cannot be having laws that we make every day, and then we abuse them left, right, and center. I want to say that let everybody be given an opportunity to serve within the period that they're supposed to be in office and be removed rightfully. Some, you know, there's so much, there are so many accusations in this country. If you go to EACC, you find every ward, every constituency, every county, every state corporation has got hundreds of cases, you know, some of them very flimsy. And it doesn't mean that every time there's a case that has been brought against someone that they are guilty. So I think I want to work with the doctrine that you're still innocent until proven guilty. Right. And you're also innocent in the case of stepping aside until a proper charge is brought against you. Then at that point you can step aside, allow investigations, then after which now a decision can be made.
Okay, all right. I want us to transition, but Honorable Cheng, you know, is it just last week or is the week before that we saw the Communications Authority of Kenya suspending its Chief Executive Officer, that is, no, DG actually, that is Ezra Chiloba, and a day later we saw a whole list of allegations and of course a report, an audit report detailing what may have been the basis. So again, the story started with EACC writing to the Cabinet Secretary asking her to suspend Engineer Thuita. Then after that, there was correspondence between the minister and the EACC, the minister and the PS. Then you saw the letter of Felix Koskei. What does that say about the strategy of the administration in dealing with corruption, and how do you tidy it up?
One, I think, you know, to the extent that, you know, you just said there's extent of communication, you know, the minister is saying no. I don't think we got to that level where you have to suspend somebody. And I read in the papers, the same papers, that a meeting was called of the board, and then it had to be cancelled, right? So there's more than meets the eye, because if you do a comparison with the one for Chiloba, where the board sits one afternoon, and the guy's given a letter to go home. No charges against him, but he's now home. So I believe that in this case of the water ministry, there is more than meets the eye, and that's why I believe the head of public service had to intervene. That there's some level of inaction on people who are supposed to take action. And number two, in my opinion, there's even what I would call belligerence. If you listen to the minister speak, there's a level of belligerence in it that, you know, you can do whatever you want. I'll not take this action. I saw that also in the papers yesterday. And so there's so much, in my opinion, undercurrents that doesn't allow us to look at this issue objectively. But most importantly, I must say that the war on corruption, will not be fought and won if we're going to start having this kind of letters flying through and EACC being thrust in the middle as if it's being used to settle scores.
Is it?
Because if EACC writes to a minister fails to act, the EACC then will have to have recourse elsewhere to ask somebody who has a bigger hammer to see if the hammer would work.
But the work of the EACC is not to ask for suspension, it is to investigate.
No.
So when the minister asks for supporting information for her to make that decision, what is wrong with that?
I think we can't look at that issue that mechanically, Sam.
No.
In the sense that,
you just used the EACC, and I'm telling you, EACC wrote to the minister.
Yes.
The minister told the EACC, give me the information.
What is the EACC saying in the letter? The EACC is saying in the letter that the continued stay of the gentleman in office undermines our investigations. That, for example, let me just do a wild guess. There are documents that the EACC needs that it's only the CEO that has. The person being investigated is the CEO. What happens if you don't give that information? How does EACC proceed in investigations? If what is required to part of the investigation is held by the EACC, held by the chief executive officer that is being investigated, and he says, I will not give. What happens in that case? Something has to be done. There has to be a recourse.
Let's take a short break here. On Deborah, when I come back, we'll be talking about the cost of running government. The Control of Budget gave her report last week and said that more than 85% of the resources that the government has is going to recurrent expenditure. Is it paying salaries? Is it servicing debt? Is it financing leaders to travel or the public service to travel? We'll talk about that after the break.